This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Hello everyone and welcome back to Basket Case Clubs. I'm Michael Connolly and I will be your host on this journey of basket casey investigations. Joining me as usual is my brother and partner in basket casey goodness, Steve Connolly. G'day Steve, how you doing?
G'day. Very well. Yes, looking forward to talking about basket casey goodness and the price-sensitive nature of clubs. For those of you who don't read the blurbs of these podcast episodes on Spotify or Apple or Google, wherever you listen to your podcasts, you should do so because you'll see a definite line in the sand from about, I don't know, maybe 10 episodes ago where basket casey goodness just started to be a regular appearance in the blurb. So yes, this is where we talk about basket casey clubs and showcasey clubs.
Yes, yeah. Well, we've talked about a lot of basket casiness recently. We haven't had too much of a chance to talk about some showcases, but I promise you we will get there. So one of the things that is really interesting, Steve, every time I read a constitution is who gets to set the fees. And it boggles me, like it always boggles me why the fees get to be set by the members at a general meeting. Now, this is an incorporated association thing, and I've seen it in all states and territories. And you look at it and you go, isn't that like me going into a fine dining establishment, sitting down and saying, I'll have the veal cordon bleu wrapped in a delicate elephantia juice, and I'd like to give you $6 for it, please. Like, for me to say this is to demand a level of service and then that I get to set the pricing, like, that's not how business works. Yet when you read those constitutions, it is.
I often draw the parallel to when I take the kids through McDonald's for a soft serve ice cream after a trip to the beach, and I jokingly say to the poor, teenage person serving in the window at the drive-through, I'll have two 30-cent cones, thanks. And, they kind of respond with a quizzical look on their face saying, that'll be $1.40. Because McDonald's knows that they can no longer charge 30 cents for what we colloquially refer to as a 30-cent cone, because that's what they used to cost. Now, however, you're right that, clubs, a lot of clubs, sporting clubs that have used, a lot of incorporated associations for that matter, that have used the model rules in one of the states or territories, as you say, and not really interrogated it deeply, because it's really easy to just say, oh yeah, that all looks right, we'll just pop our details in the relevant sections and run with it. Don't give consideration to the fact that what a constitution that's written in that way does is essentially says, here we go, we're going to, the membership of an organization elects the management committee, and those people become accountable for the decisions, including financial decisions, that organization makes during the term of their time in office. However, we're going to take away, for a lot of organizations, what is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, most important financial decision that organization is going to make each year, which is what are we going to charge of our members. That decision's put back in the hands of the members, who are not accountable. Yeah. So it really doesn't seem to make a whole heap of sense. And particularly here in Queensland, whereas we've discussed previously on the podcast, management committee members are now legally, required. They have a legal duty to prevent insolvent trading. Again, for those organizations where this is an important financial decision, which is most of them, it doesn't make a lot of sense to take the decision-making power away from those people who have a legal duty to ensure that decision's made in the right way.
Yep. I'm surprised that you're old enough to remember the 30-cent cone, Steve, but you're probably not surprised to know that I'm old enough to remember a 40-cent Mars bar. When I was young, we should be able to get a Mars. I would just like to advise all of our listeners that Basket Case Clubs is not endorsed by McDonald's family restaurants.
But if you do order McDonald's from the drive-through, just, I challenge you to mix it up and ask for a 30-cent cone and see what sort of response you get.
And the other thing you do, Steve, when you're driving through the drive-through is at the end of the order, when they say, is that all? And you say, yeah. Now, can I just confirm that order is to go? What? So yeah, look, we've launched into how fees are set, and that's a really important discussion. that, as you say, Steve, it's actually critical that they're set right, because it's the management committee members who are accountable should that organisation go belly up, and then if they trade insolvent because their fees weren't high enough to cover their outgoings, then it's the management committee that's going to fry. So shouldn't it be them who sets the fees based on what's reasonable? For, hey, we've got these expenses. These are real expenses. We have a cost of doing business. We need to make sure that we're covering that cost by our income.
Mm. But it goes deeper than that, doesn't it? Because it's not only covering our costs, it then kind of transcends into the question of, are we charging enough? Do we have a business model that supports our club's ability to continually improve our service offering? And I know we've talked in the past about clubs that don't charge enough of their members, and then every single thing that needs doing, they just expect volunteers to do it at no cost. And I've ranted about my daughter's football club that still has a shed sitting there that's not able to be used for its intended purpose, because the plumbing and electrical services, the provision for the plumbing and electrical services was not made at the time that the slab was poured. So by getting volunteers to do the job, and not through any fault of their own, but just because of their lack of experience, they did a half-assed job, and now that facility is unable to be used for its intended purpose. And I have said to many parents, after visiting the shitty old canteen next to them, how frustrating it is that the club doesn't have, a better business model, which is based on charging the right amount of your membership and other services, but also then being able to invest the right amount of money to do a job right the first time.
Yeah.
And that then brings us to this price-sensitive nature of not-for-profit organizations that is a little different from what we experience, I think, in the real world. And often when people say, oh, what do you do, Steve? And I say, oh, I work with not-for-profits. And they say, oh, it doesn't sound like a very good business model. But we understand that this perception in the not-for-profit world that the world owes us something. Council should give us access to facilities for free,
and pay for our electricity.
Oh, sorry, and pay for our electricity,
and
water,
dig up
rates.
our slabs when we don't service them with electrical and drainage and water services.
And suppliers should help us out by giving us discounted rates, and this kind of mindset of dependence on external parties, which frustrates us. But it is very commonplace, and it's part of the philosophy that we try to spruik in the not-for-profit world, which is that your organization is a business and you need to run it as the business that it is. And that includes recognizing that great receipt of great services relies on probably a commensurate investment in those services. You can't just get by expecting people to do things for free or for very little as volunteers and suppliers giving you discounted access to their products or services just because you're a not-for-profit volunteer-led organization.
Yep. I need to digress for a second, Steve. It's just based on your remembering back to the slab without the services in it. I'm sure that the first supplier who came in and ran. So where's the services for the drainage going? Where's the water? And everyone's standing around scratching their head going, yeah, about that. Do you remember? You're probably too young. No, given that you remember a 30-cent cone, you remember an ad. I forget what it was for. I think some insurance company where there was a dude spray painting the grass at Lang Park.
Yes, I do remember this.
Yeah. And then the three Broncos players come up behind him and they're looking at the great work he's done there. It looks great, Barry. But who are the Broncos?
Who are the Broncos?
Okay. Oh, man. Oh, Mr. Hart, what a mess. Oh, now we're just talking about ads. Right. So really what you're talking about, now that we come back from our little digression there, is a devaluing of time to save a bit of money. So very often in relying on volunteers to do things, we're relying on volunteers to do things, not realizing that an hour of volunteer time should be valued as much, if not more, as an hour of paid time. But for some reason, it isn't. And so I think that could be what's underlying this price-sensitive nature and the way that club volunteers think. Largely, Steve, it's just conditioning. We've been conditioned to think like that. We've always done it like that. Nobody's paid expensive rates to have our audit done each year. Nobody's paid expensive rates to actually engage a consultant to do our constitution right. Nobody's paid properly to have somebody external to the organisation come in and really challenge us on our business model, to say, okay, not-for-profit doesn't mean no profit, and we can do things differently from how they've been done because our members expect value, not just a cheap price. But we think that it's really good to be the cheapest football club on the peninsula. Well, that's just freaking stupid, isn't it? Because remembering that when we were talking branding, about how much your price says about you, says about your brand. But yeah, so there's a lot to this, but if we just focus for a moment on this time versus money thing, I remember being at a meeting. There was an induction program for a fairly green management committee in a club up north. And I was asking probing questions, as I normally do, and I was asking about their financials, and their financials were in a reasonable shape, given that they're in a regional town, a very transient town as well, with a massive mining workforce, and so people coming and going and the challenges that brings. So all in all, doing fairly well financially as far as the money in the bank and their trade goes. But I said, so how do you find doing the accounts? Because, it's one of those things for the new treasurer. And she was mortified. She says, oh, my God, Michael, you've got no idea what I've inherited. It's this Excel spreadsheet that doesn't do anything, but I need to use it, because then it's got to go from there into seriously a version of MyOb that only runs on a Windows 95 computer. So you've got to fire up this old thing, as a old laptop fires up. Then it takes for freaking, and she was really biting her tongue not to use very colorful language. So why is that? And she said, well, because when we put it to the AGM that we were going to move to Xero in the cloud, that for our accounting, that the members didn't agree to it. I said, tell me the story about that. She said, well, there's this one, she mentioned him by name. There was this one old guy who is a life member who's been a member for a long time. And he sat at the AGM and, rocked back in his chair and folded his arms and put on his best, I've been a life member around here for a long time voice, and says, no, we can't do that. No, that Xero, that's in the cloud. And the iCloud gets hacked. You can't use the iCloud because everyone gets hacked. You remember all of those celebrities who had their nudie photos? Like, no, we just can't do that. We can't risk the club's finances by moving into the cloud. It's just not going to happen. Then everyone else is sitting around him going, well, he's old. He must be right. And didn't challenge it. And seriously, when I said, well, that's not a decision for the members to make at an AGM. That's a decision that the management committee can make about what's best for this club. I'm shitting you not, Steve. She cried. She burst into tears.
I believe it.
She said, are you shitting me? Like, I have wasted so much of my life for the sake of a few dollars a month, a few small $100 a year. We're not even talking about $500 a year sort of investment here. And the amount of time that she wasted because she didn't know that the members can't lead that stupid decision, and based on nothing but fear mongering. Now, old mate didn't put his hand up to do anything.
Of course he didn't.
Let alone do the financials that was going to take time. Suffice it to say, they changed. They were very happy, and she ended up staying on as treasurer for a few years, rather than saying, I cannot do this anymore, and then trying to find somebody else to hand over a shit job to.
Yeah, well, whether this lady about whom you're talking was able to kind of grasp this in her own mind or not, what I find is that volunteers, as well as not placing, so management committees, that is, as well as not placing sufficient emphasis on the value of time of other volunteers in the organization and expecting people to do, the slab pouring and shed building discounted or no fee, they typically don't recognize the value of their own time. And we hear committee members say, oh, we've got to thank the volunteers for this and we've got to do that thank you event there. And I'm often the one to say, well, hold on, you need to also consider yourselves. So the treasurer, are you happy doing the handwritten or spreadsheet based accounting and record keeping? And typically the answer's shit, no. Of course I'm not. I would much rather that to be automated.
Wait. There's another way?
Yeah.
Oh, but you mean the way that we do it at work? I could do that at the club?
In the real world? Oh, Okay. Great.
Which is kind of the crux of it, isn't it?
It is.
Just people not realizing that there aren't two worlds. There's not a sports club world and a community not-for-profit organization world and then the rest of the world. It's the same world.
Yeah, I think that one of the silver linings of the challenges of COVID for not-for-profit organizations has been that very thing in terms of how they receive money. And I think we've probably harked on about this in the past on the podcast, but the fact that, up until 2019, far too many organizations still accepted cash only if you were to make a purchase at their canteen, for instance. Whereas now, having had a pretty transformative last few years, we see a lot more organizations that are accepting card payments. But again, that is a process that reduces the burden on volunteers who no longer need to count cash, take it to the bank, be responsible for its safe handling in transit. Money goes into your account immediately when someone taps their card on your little card reader. Sure, the provider of that card reader or merchant facility is going to take a bit of a cut, but this is, again, an investment of a little bit of money, or in this case, not, because you just put your prices up to cover that.
Yeah. How do you think everyone else
percentage? Yeah. To save the valuable time that volunteers invest. And that time has a limit. Once we're out of time, we're all out of time. You can't make more time. You can always make more money as an organization.
Imagine being a parent at a club that didn't accept cash payments in their canteen, and then your delight when you go to an away game and you go to the canteen and you say, "Oh, I'll have how much of the chips? I'll have a bucket of chips and
as in you're expecting them to only take cash
we
as
can
well.
share a hot dog, I suppose, because what have I got? $13. And we'll just have a water. And I suppose a bag of lollies.
And whatever you've got.
That'll be $13, thank you. And then
there's a limit.
Would you like to play by card? And you go, what?
I'll take an extra hot dog.
Well, hang on a minute. Now we don't have to cut a hot dog into 4 pieces and have a hot dog and a quarter of a red snake or something each.
Yeah.
We can actually do things right. So it comes down absurd. And it comes down to really, I think, Steve, the crux of it is just the devaluing of time over money.
Yep.
And so we will just continue to invest our time. And so what are the things then? Let's have a talk about what are the things that clubs do that are dumb because they're worried about spending a few bucks, this price-sensitive nature of clubs. So
they write their own constitution.
They write their own constitution. They do a DIY strategic plan that talks about increasing the water pressure to the drinking fountain on field 2.
Yeah.
I'm shitting you not, Steve. Like, how is that?
That's really strategic.
Yeah. Yet nobody's then, because they're not paying anyone to come in from the outside, nobody's kicking their shins and saying, why are you all volunteers and why are you all committing 40 hours a week to the club as well as 38 hours a week at work and trying to run a family? So why is that? Oh, because we can't afford to pay anyone. Why can't we afford to be? Well, we've never done it before. So why can't we afford to pay anyone? Because we don't make enough money. Why don't we make enough money? These are the questions that make people really uncomfortable. But if you don't make people uncomfortable, and if I hadn't asked those questions at that club up north, we wouldn't have discovered that. They wouldn't have discovered that there is a better way, and I can actually stay on as treasurer and do things the way I want to because I'm actually really freaking good at zero.
Yeah. They're also really hard questions to ask yourself when you're stuck in the day-to-day operations of an organization. It's really difficult to take a step out of that.
Yep.
And I draw the parallel and say we do a lot of this strategic planning work, for instance. However, when it's time for us as a business to do our strategic plan, we get external support.
Yeah.
We get outside support because those people are able to see the forest through the trees.
Yes. And sometimes when we do that, we win little awards, don't we, Steve?
Yes.
Always surprising and nice. You're absolutely right. Like you can't see things when you're too close to it, but you also won't even know that there's another way to ask a question. So you remember very well when we've been talking recently about cultural awareness that we all have blind spots and we all have biases. What's really important to understand is that our blind spots are so big that in things like doing our own strategic plan or doing our own constitution, we don't know what we don't know. And if we don't pay anyone to tell us what we don't know or to give us an understanding of what might be out there, we might not fix problems that are just lurking around the corner and then have to do this whole thing again.
Oh, I'm as you're talking there, I'm just thinking, casting my mind back only to last week when Matt and I ran a members forum for a golf club with whom we're working on a constitution rewrite. And initially they'd said, oh, no, look, we won't need your help with the members' engagement process. We'll be able to take carriage of that. And unsurprisingly, the proverbial hit the fan. People started to ask pointed, difficult to answer, somewhat stirring the pot type questions. And it became apparent to the board that they were going to need our independent, objective support with that member engagement. So, however, before that decision was made and before we were pulled in to come and help facilitate the forum and to essentially kind of mediate to a degree, between the members and the board during that session, the board must have spent countless hours poring over the, really lengthy written responses that had come in from members and trying to deal with the pointed questions. However, any response that they provided was always going to be received by the members through the lens of, oh, the board are trying to pull the wool over our eyes, or what are they up to now? Whereas when it's us as the independent third party that have worked with this particular club for many, many years, all of a sudden the responses are actually listened to by the members. So there's really kind of deeply seated value there that's hard to see until you've got that the pain through which the volunteers are going, and until they're spending an inordinate amount of time on this process that really, isn't going to have a long-term strategic impact on the club's financial success. A good constitution and a sound organizational structure, all things combined, can certainly, support you to driving towards financial success. But the reality is that it's more likely to keep you out of the shit rather than, make you as an organization hit the jackpot. So get the constitution up to date, contemporary, in line with the legislation, and then get on with the business of setting your prices properly as a board, but also coming up with, strategic, innovative ideas to get more people in through the doors. And, so like some of the other golf clubs with which we work that are recognizing that the nature of the game of golf is changing, and a lot of people don't have the 4 or 5 hours to play a round of 18. So do we offer pitch and putt, mini golf, all of the outside the box innovative things that are being rolled out in the world of golf? If you're bogged down in fighting with each other about what's going to be in your constitution, you can't be focusing on that other stuff.
There's a really important point in this, Steve, that struck me when you're talking about the members kicking up a stink. The other thing that a board who's doing that work themselves is probably going to be blind to is the fact that the members may be right.
Yes.
They just get so blind to listening to old Barry that they don't listen to the words that are coming out of Barry's mouth because they're coming out of Barry's mouth. They may be the right words, but you can't deny them just because you don't like the mouth that's saying them.
And I think, as I was alluding to earlier, the same is true in reverse then, isn't it? That the members won't be hearing what the board are actually saying. They're just hearing what they perceive, or
flip that around. The board don't hear what the members are saying because they think they're just having to go, well, if you want the job, you should have put your hand up at the AGM.
It's a very good point.
It's not what we're talking about. So these are easy for us to talk about because that's exactly the sort of work that we do.
Yep.
And we've spent 25 years kind of rolling our eyes when people say, oh, no, we can't afford to do that. When they know that they need to do it, they realize that they need help. And then when they get a quote, they go,
Hey, can I just quickly throw something else in before you go wherever you were going? The other big one that I think we see a lot of is organizations that jump into employing someone, let's say a general manager, without the appropriate framework around that. So they don't get the support of human resources consultant or recruitment agency. They don't get assistance with the preparation of a compliant, reasonable contract of employment. They just, I've got one from a previous place I used to work. Let's just tidy that up.
It's like 2.5 pages of crap.
Yes, that is not relevant at all in the not-for-profit setting.
Yeah, and not considering and then they end up in trouble and wondering why they're defending themselves.
Yep,
in court sometimes.
So that we see that a lot, and then of course that doesn't enable. Well, often that doesn't enable the person who's in that maybe sole employment role within the organization to do the best job possible. It doesn't empower them to actually, if they don't have the framework surrounding their employment to protect them and to enable them to actually do a good job and empower them in that way, then it can actually be a real waste of time, and it can lead to that person's departure.
So you were wondering where I was going to take this little discussion, Steve. Here's a question for you. Do you like my kitchen?
Is this a question to which there is a correct answer?
Oh, you can not like my kitchen if you like.
I do like your kitchen.
So
yes, I do like your kitchen.
What do you like about my kitchen?
Your butler's pantry.
Okay. Anything else? Why do you like the butler's pantry?
Because you can get the mess out of the area of the kitchen that everybody sees. There's another sink in there where I can go and wash up my dishes. I can do my microwaving in there without the smell permeating your entire house. There's plenty of room to move in your kitchen. Add the butler's pantry to that, and you can have a cast of thousands cooking in there.
You could. Well, can you tell my kids that, please? I don't need a cast of thousands, just a couple of them doing something anyway. So look, it is a loaded question, and that's exactly where I thought you were going to go. But I want to let you in on a secret. If I had designed that kitchen, because I'm a really smart guy who's good at, I can write a constitution and a strategic plan, and I can play guitar good. So therefore, designing a kitchen should be a walk in the park. Steve, if I had designed that kitchen, it would look exactly like my last kitchen and exactly like the kitchen before that, and I wouldn't have a butler's pantry. That wasn't my idea. That was somebody else who said, "Oh, we do, a lot of kitchens." And our customers who are the happiest are the ones who have all of this extra space where you can have your microwave, everything you just said, an extra sink to wash all of the big things, an extra bench space for preparing stuff that you keep out of sight when you're entertaining. And it's like mind blowing. Can we do that? I didn't even know it was a thing. And now I got one just because I didn't try and do it myself. And you know what? It cost me money. That it was one of those sorts of things that made the cost of our build go up. Now, everyone, when they do a reno, they spend more than they thought. Ours cost exactly what I thought, because I knew that the contract price that we signed up for was not going to include the opportunities that we took along the way, because I'm not freaking going back and doing this again, because it's a pain in the ass to build and to have to move twice and come back to the same house. It was a pain in the ass. I'm not doing this again. So let's do it right. So then we made a conscious decision to spend more on our cabinetry, to spend more on the designers of our kitchens and our bathrooms, so that we would get something that we can't think of that. I can't think of how to make this space work. You come up with an idea for me, and then you go, wow, I never thought of that, but you're absolutely right. That's exactly how that space should function.
And you're not the experienced one. You're not the one that builds kitchens every single day. So you can't possibly know what you don't know, as you said earlier. And my wife and I had an experience just last week, which was very similar, where we'd been, poring over this problem where we've got a staircase that comes up through a retaining wall, and how we were going to treat the top of it. And we thought, we could extend the deck out this way, but we don't know where to stop it. And we don't know what angle and shape that should be. And as soon as we spoke with the bloke who does our landscaping work, he said, and he used his measuring tape as he was measuring it and said, why don't you just do this? And did a little dog leg thing. And we kind of looked at each other and shook our heads and said, this is why we get you here, Eugene.
And how much time that you could have spent drinking margaritas instead of standing around the stairs wondering what you were going to do.
We probably spend a lot of the time poring over the problem with margaritas in our hands. So we haven't lost any.
Okay.
Haven't missed any opportunity there.
That's effective multitasking. I'll give you that.
Yeah, but you're right. We invest in not just the doing of the work with the hands, but we're investing in the minds and the ability for the people who provide support to think.
And if you just ask, they're prepared to give you that information for nothing. You're paying for their hands. They're prepared to give you their brains for nothing. Yep. Oh, well, why don't we just do this? So exactly the same thing happens at clubs, Steve. Instead of actually taking design advice, I know a drafty. So here, just take my literal drawing on the back of a napkin and turn that into a design, and then that becomes one of these ugly pimple on a dog's butthole bloody clubhouses that looks like it looks awful and doesn't function very well, because nobody thought outside the box to say, we could actually do things differently, because they were price sensitive and they didn't want to pay for it. Yep. And then generations of people have to put up with that, because we can't afford it, and people just adopt the same mindset. But I've said, okay, that's physical and that's easy to understand. But Steve, how many shitty club logos have you seen?
Yeah.
Seriously, I've got some. I went through a phase where I was collecting a lot of club shirts from clients. And it's not that I don't like the club shirts. I only stopped it because I got in trouble because I kept having overflowing clothes drawers.
You've got enough painting shirts, Michael.
Yeah, I know, and I'm not. I'm not that good at painting, so I'm not going to do enough of. I'm not going to do enough of it to warrant having all of these shirts. But what used to boggle me was when I'm looking at the logo on the shirt, saying, "Seriously, like it's a stick figure that somebody has drawn." I can show you the one that I'm thinking because I just wore it to go for a run last week.
I probably designed that one. That's about as good as my artistic flair extends to.
But you're doing things that there are professionals who do this, do really good jobs at this. Who manages their own marketing? How many good marketing plans have you seen in clubs? I'm happy to say that I've seen a few because our teams helped put them together. But you should see the looks on people's faces when our marketing people are saying, "Oh, have you ever thought of this?" And they go, "What? I thought that was only for professional hotels. Why would we need a good review on TripAdvisor?" Why wouldn't you? People read that shit, man. People make buying decisions, make buying decisions on those reviews.
Yeah.
So you kind of need them. So, but yeah, just fascinating that it extends so far. And the final one, because we can go on and on. The final one I want to talk about is software. So you mentioned things like point of sale systems and FPOS and being able to receive card payments, but the amount of clubs that are still not using software systems and the membership management systems for their membership management and competition management don't necessarily give them everything they need. They don't have a good customer relationship management system, so they can track the history of a member. They're not collecting data that is going to be so valuable then when they can interrogate that data to see who's staying and who's leaving. What are the commonalities between the people who are leaving? Is it an age thing? Is it a gender thing? Is it an other interests thing? Are they involved in other sport? How are you tracking that? If you're not tracking that, then you can never learn from it. And if you can't learn from it, you can't adjust what you're doing. So that dashboard analogy is so important because when you've got a dashboard, you're looking at the gauges and the gauges are telling you something. When you know what the gauge says and you have a good plan that says what you want the gauge to say, you can then adjust your inputs to adjust then what the gauge is reading so that it then starts to read what it's supposed to. So on an aeroplane, I've got the altimeter. If I'm supposed to be at 35,000 feet and the altimeter says 20,000 feet, I know what I've got to do. I've got to pull back on the stick and forward on the throttle because we got to get 15,000 feet higher than we are. So I can adjust my inputs, knowing where we are and knowing where we want to be. So that's the criticality of having software. But it goes beyond just the zero Windows 95 version of MyOb that we were talking about before, right through our operations. So pay a little bit to get a massive benefit. But before you do anything, just start with a good plan. So before you go and invest in software, it's very easy to go down a trap of having a lot of different software that does all individually good things that aren't necessarily giving you what you want because you never stopped to think, what do we want to get out of this? How do we want this software to be a great servant to buy us back time so that when we invest our lot of, because in all honesty, Steve, you know as well as I do, that the 40-hour-a-week volunteers are always going to be 40 hours a week volunteers because that's what they want to do. That's how committed they are. My goal is not, if they don't want to, not to reduce the amount of volunteer time they're doing. If they want to, then absolutely that's my goal. And all of the same principles apply. But it's the time that they're spending, it's getting the highest and best value out of that time. Oh, so there's lots and lots of things, Steve, as that people are just too price sensitive and completely unnecessarily.
Just quickly, I know that there's one thing we have discussed when you were soon after you'd returned from a tennis trip and the facility that you had visited with Ethan was falling down and maintenance wasn't being complete. Maintenance activities weren't being completed as they should have. And I just quickly wanted to mention that there is one particular area where we see volunteers often not investing, and that is in construction projects, retaining walls, projects at which people, for which people might be working at heights, or projects that include really dangerous stuff like high voltage electricity. And they are some areas where I think it's vitally important that we get the right people doing the work. Now, you might be fortunate to have qualified tradespeople in your organisation on whom you can call for support. But I really think it's important to mention that that's not something on which your organisation should rely. And particularly when we're talking about, construction projects where appropriate safety measures must be in place and we shouldn't have unqualified people doing the work, that, probably, arguably more than anything else, that's where we need to see clubs investing wisely so that the job gets done right. Not only so that there's provision for services in your concrete slab, but also so people don't get badly hurt or worse.
Yeah, exactly. So to finish off then, Steve, we got to point at the elephant in the room, and that is that it's all well and good for clubs to be making better decisions, to invest in things where they should, and to be engaging outside assistance to make life better, make life easier, get more for their time that they're investing. But we've talked largely about how they're overvaluing money and leaving it in the bank and undervaluing the time that people spend. But it also can come down to the fact that too many clubs just don't got the money to spend. Well, we don't have the money. We haven't budgeted for it. So really, where we go from here is to come back and have another discussion about exactly how to get the money. And so obviously we've talked about this, and I was going to say ad nauseum, but I'm not feeling sick yet. We've talked about this.
It'll take some time yet. Yes.
Yeah. It's about understanding that it's okay to make money, understanding your value proposition, understanding how to set your fees. So let's come back and have that discussion, because I think that there's some real value in challenging old thinking and some really simple tools to just say, to help our volunteers to go, oh, I never thought we could do that. And I've literally had people say that. So let's come back and talk about that next time.
Look forward to it.
Steve, as always, it's been a pleasure talking to you about money, because it's always fun to talk about money, because it's low-hanging fruit, really. It's pretty easy to see, this is bad decisions. We're making decisions based around the wrong decision-making framework, therefore we're making bad decisions. So let's adjust our decision-making framework so that we get better decisions, and not immediately, but over a shorter time than it will if you keep making bad decisions, you'll start to get better results.
Yes.
So for those of you who are not yet connected to us on our website to get our newsletter that goes out with really cool stuff in it, make sure you do, cprgroup.com.au. You can follow us on social media. Thanks, of course, to Jess for making us sound fantastic again. And Steve, I look forward to talking to you more about money next time.
As do I. Thanks, Mick. Ciao.
See ya.